Okay. Disclaimer. There are going to be some ideas that you hear in this video that are going to be difficult to listen to. It's a very difficult conversation. And here on the Talking Shit podcast, we want to be able to discuss a lot of different situations, a lot of different scenarios that go on in our society, and be able to do so where we can amicably disagree on certain things with both myself and Captain Paul, my co-host, but also you, the viewer. We ask that you do not prematurely click off of this video the second that you hear something that you deem questionable. We would like you to hear all of the premises that are laid forth, and then if you believe that our methodology or our reasoning is faulty, we would like you to let us know in the comments section what you thought was faulty so that we can address them. Perhaps we'll learn something. So please, we would love for you to actually watch through to completion as much as you possibly can, and then interact with us. We will be active in the comment section. We will read every single comment. Thank you. All right, there's a lot of stuff going on in the world, and there's so many topics that we would love to cover here on the TSP, and we will get to it. However, we come to you today with a subject that we would rather not have to come to you with. We're going to talk a bit about Tyre Nichols, 29-year-old man who was stopped in a vehicle by police in Memphis and Memphis, Tennessee, for those around the world. And some things happened, and we're going to talk about it a little bit today. So, as you know, with a lot of these situations, I work really hard to stay away from watching the footage of unarmed citizens being beaten or kneeled or shot to death for no real good reason. Everybody has their reasons for doing things in this world, but when it comes to stuff like this, I think that when you're going to take somebody's life, there should be a good reason, or at least a justifiable reason. And it appears from the things that I've read, because I do not want to traumatize myself again with another one of these types of situations. But Kat, you watched the video.
Yeah, I watched the video. I watched the body cam of it, and I had to sift through. One was a news channel, but whatever. So I watched the body cam of a few different people. It was kind of like a montage, quote unquote, maybe poor phrasing there, of several different body cams. And I mean, with Nichols, it wasn't like he was being super compliant at first, but then when they got him under control, and then they just like started beating the brakes off him, like holy shit. Um, and it was such an excessive use of force when you had so many people around him that if you needed to restrain a man, you had enough big dudes there to really make sure to secure him, get cuffs on. There was no need for that amount of violence that you saw, because like there was one point where they hold him and one guy's just like holding him up and the other guy's punching him in the head. It was crazy, and I'll just and I feel like I have to note this, but all the officers were black.
Yeah, that's one of the things, right?
None of them were white, so
Yep.
it's not like it was a racist thing, I guess. But yeah, it was just.
I'm
It
going to
was
make the case that it is a racist thing. I'm going to make that case today, and here's why. People assume that you have to be Caucasian and the victim has to be non-Caucasian for it to be racist. But if you look at what a racist actually is, it is a person that commits an act based on racial bias. do you believe that black people can be racially biased against other black people?
Um, that I don't know. Maybe I think that's a stretch. I think that's a stretch.
I experienced it as
mm,
a child, as a teenager, and as an adult.
mm.
Rate the most racial abuse I've ever suffered from any group of people has come from black people, Cat.
Now, then let me ask you this question. Let's have this conversation. This is why we have this channel for. So when you say the most racial bias you've kind of faced is from your own people, now is it from like an economic like level, like or is it like a class level, or like what determined for them to be racist? Like what was the difference there, right? Because that's another thing for me. Is it more is it racism or is it classism, right? Because that's kind of I mean, sometimes when people feel like, oh, I'm a higher economic earning or a lower, and they'll hate a different economic level, right? Was that to play at all? I'm shooting in the dark here, just kind of curiously.
I mean, you're actually bringing up a lot of the tenets that people point to when they point to systemic racism in this country.
Mm,
Because when you look at this country's history of intentionally economically disadvantaging black people in this country on
mm-hmm.
purpose, and doing so even if what they're doing is illegal, them the laws not being enforced
Mm,
kind of lead them to believe that our powers that be are at least compliant when the rights of black people uh, are being trampled upon. So recently, I'll give you an example. Recently,
mm-hmm.
a bank was just recently starting to be held accountable for redlining policies. Now, redlining has been illegal for 50 years,
Right.
but when you look at how they do the lending, how appraisers treat the appraisals of certain houses based
Mm-hmm.
upon the race of the people that they think own the house, which is
Yeah.
something that's been very common.
Mm-hmm.
You look at the system, not necessarily the people operating within the system.
Mm-hmm.
So when I was growing up, we were all of a very low economic, uh,
Income.
yeah, a low economic level.
Mm-hmm.
And, I was being abused into, I guess, expressing my intelligence at home. So when I would go to school, I wouldn't be the kid that paid the most attention, but I would be the kid that retained the most information
Mm,
on a regular basis. Also,
mm,
we didn't talk hood in my house. So
mm.
I would go to school and I would speak the way that I speak. I mean, you remember like way back in the days when I started doing YouTube before the face reveal, everybody, including yourself, assumed I was white. so, 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 growing up and, they're calling you corny white boy
Mm,
and, there's, oh, you think you're better than us and you're just a
mm,
nerd. They look at your test scores and they want to beat you up because your test scores are higher than theirs. You didn't wear the same clothes that they wore. You wore your pants differently. You didn't wear your pants around your thighs or your knees or your ankles.
mm-hmm.
So you think you're better than everybody else. And it's just like, I've experienced it. I've experienced, people thinking the worst of me before I even opened my mouth because they looked at my skin color. And a lot of the times it's people that look like me. So, and I talked to you about this on the phone before we went on the air when
Mm,
it comes to police brutality and excessive force. Per capita, the officers that use the most excessive force are black cops on black citizens.
mm,
They're the quickest to use the force. They're the quickest to go over the line. I know we talk a lot about white on black, cops on civilians.
right.
There are not that many black police officers on the force, but the FBI and their statistics are very clear. When it comes to excessive force, black is and the way that a lot of black people look at these cops, that's why like when they see that cops are black in their neighborhoods, they don't trust them, because they look at them kind of like house Negroes,
So
where
can I?
like they're serving the massa, and then they are so eager to please massa that they go way beyond what some of the white guys would do on the force. And it's my suspicion that some of these cops that use the level of brutality that they use on people that look like themselves while in uniform, it leads me to believe, and somebody please correct me in the comment section if I'm way off base,
Mm-hmm.
but it comes off as like you want to be accepted by the white hierarchy so much that you are willing to beat up and even sometimes beat to death the people that look like you in your community.
Can I counter that actually? Because this, I want to kind of tie this into the conversation in the you growing up, right? You said people of your own race looked at you, treated you differently because you spoke a different way, wore clothes a certain way, because you weren't typical, like quote unquote ghetto, right? You weren't with the in crowd in that aspect. And this is where I don't necessarily think it's racism. I think it's more of a class thing. These black officers, who's to say they haven't had that same experience? And I'm not justifying it, right? I'm not justifying their behavior, because I think at the end of the day, you should treat every human being humanely. But there could be some internal fact where they're not accepted by their own race, and
That's common.
but they're not accepted by their own race, not accepted because they're an officer. Maybe they talked a certain way growing up, and whereas you, I feel like, had a little bit of a healthier way. Some people don't have that healthy way of outlet, and they kind of let, now that they're in a position of power, they get all that earlier frustrations out from earlier in like in their life out, and because they finally have this position of power where they can kind of like dominate the situation.
Well, I'll
You
make a
get what we go?
correction. I'll make a correction here. I didn't have a healthier way of dealing with this.
Mm,
I had an unhealthy way of dealing with abuse since I came up being severely abused. And
mm,
so I was socialized or conditioned to believe that
mm,
I'm just going to be abused. So it didn't matter who was doing it. It was my
mm,
job to just take it. So it's not
mm,
like I had a healthier out. I didn't have a healthy outlet
mm,
for these situations. It's just that I was beat into docility
mm,
from when I was inside the home from abusive family members, parents, foster parents, whatever.
mm,
Um, and then I just kind of took what was coming to me, and then I tried to deflect some of the abuse that was coming to me from
mm,
outside the home using humor.
mm,
So yeah, I'm not gonna go out and say, oh yeah, like I handled this so much better than these guys because I dealt with it healthily and they didn't know. We
mm.
I don't know
Well,
if there is a healthy way to deal with it, and some people go too far and some
mm.
people don't.
Well, what maybe not necessarily the best wording on my part by saying dealing with a healthy way, right? But I think some people handle things differently, and when you put people that have been persecuted against into positions of power, they're sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes will lash out. And this isn't just a black cop thing or a white cop thing. I think overall, when you give people power, you know, they get corrupted in some sense or form, right? Like, I mean, any type of position of power, people like to wield that over others. That's the big flaw with human beings, right? And that's why we go to wars for like thousands of years. We've had war because we want to conquer other people. And I mean, to a lesser degree, I think with some of these police interactions, right? They have body cam on, recording, like every single fact's like not to do this, but they get caught up in the moment because they're in that powerful position. I'm gonna teach this mother. I'm gonna
But it's
you
not just
you better comply because I'm God right in this situation. I
but
think some of
it's
it's
not
not.
just the power. It's not just the power, Cap.
Mm,
A lot of police officers, including upstanding black police officers, there are a lot of good black police officers.
right.
They complain that when they come out of the academy, and they go into, you know, the roll call or whatever, the indoctrination once they actually graduate and get their badge, because you know when they go to the academy, they're taught
Right.
about, you know, civil rights, and they're taught about the law and properly enforcing the law. The first time that they get with a supervisor, first thing the supervisor tells them is forget everything you heard about in, you know, this is the real world, this is the real streets, and it's us versus them. And then they change and they try to indoctrinate them into this us versus them mentality. And then you have people who came into the police force with good intentions, and then they end up being corrupted by the system. Oh, this is just the way things are. And people are going to look at you like this. And that uniform and that badge and that gun in your hip, that puts a target on your back before they ever experience a target actually being on their back. Because this guy, Tyre,
mm-hmm.
I don't know how to pronounce his first name, but this guy was not targeting them.
No.
He was stopped by them, and he can smell. You could tell the dude could smell something was fishy.
Right.
Because the dude was just kind of like, listen, y'all doing the most right now. I'm not a threat. Y'all doing the most right now. Y'all guys are doing a lot, right? And then they're like, oh, this guy is going to run from us. Why the fuck you think that he was going to run from you? Because he can smell the bloodthirstiness on your breath. All five of you. He's running for his life. He's not running to end your life. He's running to save his own life.
Yeah. I mean, I guess, like, because the footage is bad. Really bad. It shows, like, those guys, they're already gotten arrested, and they're going to be detained, and kind of, like, further sentencing is going to come out because he passed away a few days later.
My hot take coming up.
A few days later. When it kind of comes down to it, it never should have happened in the first place. You know, did he resist a little bit at the first? Yeah, but, like, you have 5 officers there.
Why do you think he started resisting? If you look at the aftermath and everything that happened, and then beating him while he was defenseless, is it reasonable to infer that he knew that something was out of the ordinary with this particular traffic stop, with the way that they were approaching it from the very beginning?
I mean, like I said, I can't really refute that because I saw on the cam one guy holding him up while he's like hands behind the back, and the other one's just laying punches like a fucking madman, like treating his head like a fucking speed bag. So I'm not sitting here defending the officers. I'm just merely the philosophy of which you're going by. I think it's just more like, and I can't speak for the black experience, obviously, for fucking these reasons, but I think when it kind of
you can't even speak for the white experience. You don't even have enough pink in your fucking skin. You're pale as shit, son. Albino motherfucker.
But thanks my Scottish blood. But when it kind of comes down to it, is I think overall human beings, when we get any position of power, I'm going to sound terrible when I say this, but when you say indoctrination. Indoctrination. I butchered that. When you say that phrase, right? I think there's a point in degree, but I think that happens in most professions, right? Like you go to college, you get trained, and I've seen it even in my field, right? Oh, you do this, this, and this. Nah, fuck that. You don't need to do radar plots or any of that shit. We do it this way. We do it this way. And when it kind of comes down to it, is I feel like that happens in every industry. A lot of good training and stuff you should follow goes out the fucking window because people do, like, the people in charge do things a certain way and they want you to do it.
And that's their system.
And that's their system to a degree. I would have to say, to solve this issue, you would need a complete revamping of how the police is handled and how the training goes about, and having, you know, harder and firmer sanctions, which against police departments that do not follow these protocols and that are shown to be discriminatory towards their constituents. Because that's another thing.
Can I just one tiny pushback? Because what you said made a lot of sense, but here's why it doesn't fit in this situation. When you looked at the savageness of that beating, did that look like training or did that look emotional? Did that look personal?
It looked evil. Honestly.
But did it look like it was rage-filled?
Yeah, no, it definitely looked rage-filled. Like,
that's what I'm saying. So it looked like they beat him like it was personal. So all the training goes out of the window. For all we know, the Memphis Police Department is the best in the nation when it comes to training their officers. I'm not saying that that's the case, but I'm just saying just for argument's sake.
Correct.
What you saw there was not a failure of police protocol. It was a failure of humanity. They did not look at him as a human being, which is why I come back to what I said already. And the thing is, I've already admitted to this, and I'm telling you, black men that watch our channel, black women that watch our channel, please comment on this in the comment section. But when I walk down the street in Midtown and a white girl walks past me, I don't look a second time. I keep it moving. But let somebody to look by me, and I've got all my security systems are checked around me. Right? We black people look upon other black people with added suspicion that we don't necessarily attribute to any other race of people. Unless we go into like a supermarket and we see some dude that looked like he got rejected by a girl, then we're like, yo, I hope he's not packing. But besides that, we are more careful about our personal security around people that look like us than people that don't. We don't. When a white man walks by, unless he's walking around with like a hood and he's walking around with a burning cross or some shit like that, we don't give him a fucking second look. But on default, we treat the people that look most like us with more suspicion than we treat other people. You can't tell me that's not racial.
Now, why do you think that is?
I think part of it is that there is a societal kind of brainwashing that you kind of buy into from when you're a little kid that tells you that white is right. And they've done like different social experiments that I think are actually kind of reprehensible. But they'll give like a young black girl, they'll give her a choice of dolls to play with. And they found that most of the black girls would choose the white doll because the white doll is good. You know, they've already kind of had that messaging that white is better, white is superior, white is whatever. So if young black girls have been found to, then that means that the system around them is teaching them that, because they didn't come up with that themselves. So you know, the fact that, like, I give you another example, right? Like sometimes, you know, I love to watch MMA, right? Sometimes you'll see a black fighter go up against a white fighter, and you'll see comments like, "Yo, how can he lose to that white boy?" Because the programming is we're supposed to be more successful at being brutish and violent than the white people. The white people are more civilized, when that's not even true. Most black people are super civilized people, just like everybody else, everywhere else. But we have this inherent bias even against ourselves. Kind of like when we talk to men about a lot of the situations, and then you'll see like with the lady cop that was acting like she was on the casting couch. Oh, remember her, right?
Yeah.
Like even the guys in our own comment stream, one of them was just like, well, you know, chances are, you know, she was predated on. And it's just like, no, she was just giving away vaginal reparations. Like, that's what she was doing. Like, don't put it on, don't assume that, you know, because it's a sexual situation and she's for the precinct, that it means that she was taken against her will. No, she was handing out party favors.
Yeah, man, she did a lot of community service.
A lot of community service. That's why she won the award in 2021. But the point that I'm making is, the point that I'm making here is that we have these inherent biases against black people, against men, and then you add to it against black men. So imagine you see these Memphis officers, right? There's 5 of them. They've gone through the indoctrination. They believe that they have transcended regular blackness because now they are part of law enforcement. They're kind of like that character in Django Unchained, Samuel L. Jackson's character.
Yeah.
And you see they go even harder than the people that they're supposed to be trying to please. And this is something that we've seen in the black community, and we look at it and we're like, not surprised. Not surprised.
So, I know we're getting like, because this is actually a good discussion, so I kind of want to keep this going, but and maybe we'll split it up. But honest question here then. When it kind of comes to even black media, and how things were portrayed in the 90s and early 2000s with, and I'm not one of these people that believes art or music creates violence necessary, but the
Yeah, I know where you're going
image
with this.
of the image of the black man was to be rough, tough, and not take any shit. And if someone was going to start something, you carried your gun and you pop shots off. I mean, one of the most famous artists of all time in New York is 50 Cent, right? Like when
And
he
he's
kind of
famous for getting shot 9 times.
exactly. And does that play a part of it where you even have black
Can I blow
celebrities
your
or
mind?
black media feeding into it?
Can I
Go ahead.
blow your mind?
Yeah.
It actually goes back to the birth of moving pictures in this country. There was a movie called Birth of a Nation.
Mm.
And what they did was they put it into the minds, because remember, slavery had just been abolished within 50 years. Within
Right.
50 years, right? This is a
Mm.
long time ago. They
Mm.
started sowing the seeds of the shifty, conniving, scamming, raping, murdering, burglary black man. They started putting that image in the
Mm.
minds of everyone who watched the first motion pictures, that these are what black people are. And the women are easy. You could do whatever you want to them. They just give it up easy. The most prudish women in the country were black women.
Mm.
We're talking about a mental chastity belt where
Mm.
they were doing nothing if they were not married to that man. But they had already put the thought into everybody's mind, not just the white person's mind, but also the black person's mind, to push that propaganda that these people were people that couldn't be trusted, that had no morals, so that they could still feel superior to these people. There was a reason why during slavery, black people were not allowed to learn how to read or write, because they were afraid of what black people would be able to do if they knew how to read and write. So they had to make it
Yeah.
look like they're stupid. They had to make them look like they were brutish. They had to make them look like, oh, and because that's one of the ways that they use marijuana in the early days to criminalize it. Oh, it sends them into this frenzy where they're going to come rape your pure, beautiful young white women. They're coming for your daughters. You got to get rid of this weed. And
Yeah.
it was just propaganda after propaganda to criminalize the people in your mind, when the vast majority of those people, and even still today, the vast majority of white people, or of black people, are upstanding citizens across the board. So then when you say to me, well, what about all the rap music in the 90s? Yeah, that was part of the scam, but that's end stage. Like by then, we had already seen that we had the fight for a dude that was drugging and actually raping women. We had to rely on him to start making sure that black people were casted in media in a
Right.
positive way. We're talking about Bill Cosby,
Yeah.
right? Right? So
Yeah. Yeah.
like you always saw black people either the help or the criminal, the rapist, the murderer. That's how they were
But
portrayed.
and listen, obviously there's a fucked up history with the United States of America with race issues, slavery, equal rights,
But
civil
we're talking
rights.
media here, and we're talking about the
We're talking
progression of
minute,
media and
but
how
the,
it
but the, but this is
functions as
hold
propaganda.
on, hold on. This is where I
Yeah.
want to get into. Well, first off, propaganda is always like World War II, right? They had Looney Tunes like making fun of the Germans and the Japanese, right? And
And the
you even
French.
had in the French, and you had Japanese internment cat. Like there's a whole
Yep.
fucking thing,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. But I'm just saying,
Where
media as
right.
propaganda in the
But
terms of how we view black people in the United
but
States.
this is where I'm gonna swing it, right? We're in a
Hmm.
new day and age where we have a lot of information at our fingertips, and I feel like in a lot of ways it's a golden age. Like we don't need to go to a library even to find out or read novels, and we don't need to go to uh, like an encyclopedia to look up things. Everything is at the tip of our fingertips. Then why insert like, and I'm not just saying just purely with just African Americans, because there's mobs and like other shit like that. But when it kind of comes down to like gang culture and stuff like that, and like still having that prevalent in the music, do you think that affects do you think that affects the culture? Like, I understand the art form of it, right? And some of the
Hmm.
music can come out and be really nice and really beautiful to a
Right.
degree,
Yeah.
but
Even I still love some of
but
it, and like some of that subject matter is reprehensible.
and that's where I'm kind of going with it, is that do you feel like for maybe black people to even love themselves, they need to move away from that? Because I've seen like of certain artists like Kendrick Lamar, where he's
They
kind of
don't get the
evolved,
love. Right. J.
but
Cole, I think, is another one, right?
they've evolved over time. And like I thought his last project was beautiful in a lot of ways and was very touched very raw and difficult subjects. Like I couldn't even imagine like going through, but
Hmm.
like and you just have these type of artists that have evolved over time, but then like the violent sometimes in the very rough stuff kind of gets put to the top. I mean, would that
Right.
maybe help with the imagery of self love of black people even beginning to love themselves?
Well,
Just
let
an
me ask
honest
you this.
question.
Well, let me pose it to you like this, right?
Mm-hmm.
When you think of the rappers that started gangster rap, where did they get their inspiration from? And you heard it in multiple rap artist songs from East Coast and West Coast.
Right.
Where did they get their inspiration from? That
Their
was that
lives.
was we're talking about Scarface
Right.
and The Godfather,
Yep. Oh yeah.
right? So
Mm-hmm.
one of the things is that Big Pun had he had a song at the end of his first album. I can't remember the name
I'm gonna have to look that
of
up
this
now.
song, but he said violence has always existed before our music was even suggested.
That's a bar. Yeah.
So like they're trying to make it like violence is like this newfangled black thing
No, it's
when
not.
but when it's not. So a lot of people want to blame gangster rap. And even Big Pun back in the day was like, nah, like you're not going to place that on us. And you're not going to infringe on our right to free speech when you
Mm-hmm.
put us in these ghettos and you economically disadvantage us. And then when we make music about the shit that we see and experience, that's a problem too. Like if we didn't have redlining and people stealing black people's money when that were from the South migrating to Illinois, and
Mm-hmm.
they weren't stealing their money and stealing the deeds to their homes and doing all kinds of messed up stuff, and they just
Mm-hmm.
treated black people in the job market and in the real estate market the same way that they treat white people, we wouldn't even be having these discussions to begin with,
Mm-hmm.
because we would have more racial um, uh, heterogeneous racial makeups around the country if there weren't actual systems in place to segregate white and black people, because that's also a huge problem. Like we talked about the Buffalo shooter right
Mm-hmm.
here on this channel, we talked about that. And
Correct.
the kid didn't even have good information because he never actually been around black people. So he was going to, oh, these black people are replacing us, didn't have accurate information and didn't actually personally know any black people. And part of that is the economic and political segregation that we have that allows people to judge black people who've never been around black people. He had to drive 4 hours away from
Out
his
of his.
house to go
Yep.
find a supermarket to shoot people up in, while he was simultaneously claiming they will not replace us. You had to drive 4 hours to find some. Like, but they're not thinking about that because we're so racially. You have so many people that don't have like a good actual reference point in their own lives to say, you know what, this is my view on black people. See, TSP
That.
exists
Mm,
because your mind is open enough to have these conversations. Do you know why your mind was open enough to have these conversations, Cap? Because you were exposed to black kids in school.
yeah. Well, my first high school was predominantly black and Spanish, actually, and that's actually what I
And
was
you still
gonna.
came out a conservative. Look at that.
Well, conservative economically, not
Yeah,
necessarily
we
socially,
socially, right, right.
but when it kind of comes, and even some of this stuff as you go through the
You're
years,
opposite. I just realized that.
what's that? Yeah, I know.
Like I'm leftist, like economically, but not so much socially. So like we're this weird fucking hodgepodge. I love it.
But when it kind of comes down to it, and that's actually kind of what I wanted to go with that, because I actually think you hit a lot of nice points there. I think people tend to hate they tend to hate something that they can't really, if they don't know it, right? And I feel like some of these shooters, right, like the guy down in Texas, the Walmart guy, like relatively recently, like went on a Hispanic shooting spree because the Hispanic invasion,
and then you find out that a lot of the people that go there
are
were
fucking
not
Hispanic.
trying to stay in the country. They were going there to buy some shit at Walmart and then go back over the border.
Yeah, exactly. I know it's so stupid you can't even fucking explain it. But when it kind of comes down to it, in my opinion, it's just far easier to hate people if you never interact with them.
Yeah.
And I mean,
didn't we just put out a clip of something you said recently about having to demonize other people?
The other stuff, yeah. That went actually relatively pretty viral for our type of channel, and
right.
It's so true, because if you're not around different cultures and you just stay in your little area, and that's actually why I think we're seeing so much violence now, is because we're all isolated and we're also just staying in our bubble. So now we're getting trapped in like it's us against them mentality instead of being the melting pot we should be in America. I'm not saying we've had a perfect history here in the United States of America, but like I know with me going to that school in Pawtucket where it was way low, it's like one of the lowest income places in Rhode Island, right? Went to a school there, and kind of you meet people from so many different backgrounds. It kind of opens up your eyes, and it makes you less heartless in a way, right? Because I was exposed to some shit with my best friend Darren, who's no longer with us, and like single mom was on drugs, like he just he dealt with so much shit, and like just other friends of ours that like kind of similar situations, and it's like it kind of makes you like, damn, man, like that's a struggle, that's a human being. And I feel like if more people were just willing to talk with one another, there would be less hatred, and just understanding like, hey man, like this shit's a different skin tone. That's all it fucking is. Like me and you can have common interests. Like it's really that, or maybe not even necessarily common interests. Maybe we just fucking have a good energy and vibe together. You know what I mean?
Right.
But I just think overall, kind of maybe trying to tie this all together, because we've been talking for a bit, is
no, I got two more premises to bring up. So we're gonna go as long as this has to go.
So we'll keep rolling. This is like kind of fun, like a TSP unexpected. But when it kind of comes down to it, it is baffling in a way how some people in today's modern age, I feel like, get lost in this weird ideology where it's us against them, where, I mean, maybe this phone is too dangerous in a way, right? Because if I want to find something that says the fucking Earth is flat, which it's fucking not, because I have to do calculations when I cross the Atlantic. So sorry,
calm down,
but
Paul.
like stupidest thing. I have to fucking do. I have to do.
Calm down, Cap.
I have to do SOHCAHTOA to get the fucking courses. But anyways, when it kind of comes down to it, I look at it and it's like, maybe we just have too much information. Maybe we're too stuck behind these screens, not going out, not socializing, not talking with other human beings. Thus, it's raising these shootings, it's raising these hate crimes. It's even raising our own ignorance, because we're just being stuck within our own bubble. Because like me and you are a little bit more open-minded. Mind you, there's sometimes you'll have to open my mind and vice versa, right? But maybe we're kind of stuck in a line of thought. But most people don't have those people to like draw them out and be like,
right.
maybe that thought. And unfortunately with the internet, if you want to back up your belief, you can find a bunch of fucking websites to do it, regardless how
shout
foolish
out to Kyrie
it is.
Irving.
Shout out to Kanye West, right?
Word. There's two things I want to bring up, Cap, and you can. I got a hot take here. and I have an inquiry for you and for our audience. Right. So I'm going to hit you with the hot take first, because this is the Talking Shit podcast, home of the cold truth
and the
hot takes. And here's a hot take here, Cap. I am going to say, and stick with me here, folks. Don't turn off the video when you hear this, okay? I don't think that there should be any protests over this incident. And I'm going to tell you why. If you go all the way back to the protests that were set off by Michael Brown, Trayvon Martin, George Floyd, and the like, do you know what all of those situations had in common, Cap?
They were all kind of painted negatively in the press. Well, certain.
Well, yeah, they try, obviously, but the people who are responsible for their death were free as a motherfucking bird at the time that the protest began. And the thing is, when you look at the George Floyd situation, they waited several days to even think about charging Derek Chauvin, who was the real perpetrator. The other officers there, they were not as involved.
Yeah, they should have stepped in though.
I know, but they were not as involved with the actual crime, right?
Right.
If they would have apprehended Derek Chauvin from the beginning, things would have been very different. But they let several days go by, and this motherfucker's still walking free. This is not the case here. All 5 officers, if you look at the fucking charges they hit these guys with, they did not hold back on these officers. And before they leveled any charge, before they let the video loose, they hit them with a bevy of charges that were like, holy shit. Like, I'm looking right now for the charges that they were hit with. Oh, here. All of them were charged with second-degree murder. And I think there was some kidnapping charges. It's not in the article I'm looking at, but there were kidnapping charges and aggravated assault charges. I mean, they went to the nines against these guys. Now, some cynical black people will say there are no white officers involved, so you definitely gonna throw the book at this motherfucker, right? Like, cynical black people gonna look at that like, yeah, we've seen this before, right? But when you look at the fact that they very swiftly, and the police chief came right out ahead and said, everything we saw here was criminal. We're going to brace you guys for what you're about to see. But we got all these motherfuckers off the street. We've got visual, they are never going to be able to claim under oath, I feared for my life and going to walk free. No, these motherfuckers are going underneath the jail. What is there to protest if it's been handled swiftly and professionally, unlike in those other situations where, I mean, George Zimmerman is still walking around right now, right? It took a long time for them to get Derek Chauvin in custody. You look at a lot of these other situations where the officers are not even charged and not held accountable, and they're still walking the streets. People are like, what you're telling us officially, what the system is telling us is that Black lives do not matter, because when they are taken, there is no action taken. In this case, the Black life was answered for immediately. What the fuck more do you want the government to do? And that's why I disagree with any kind of protest, because at what point, what do you want them to change in this situation? What more do you want them to do that they haven't already done?
I mean, you word it that way. It makes sense. I apologize for leaning back. My hips acting up. But that's
When I told you I was going to go here, you was like, what?
Yeah.
Yo, we need to get in the studio.
Listen. Yo, calm down. Listen, I'm a white man. I can't say that shit. They'll cancel my ass. But I mean, you're right. They got them arrested, booked, taken care. very quickly, very quickly.
Because that's all we ask for as black people is do to them what you would do to us with the same charges, right? If we took somebody's life, we're getting arraigned super fast. We're in front of a judge answering guilty or not guilty, right? Like, just like that. They handled these motherfuckers mad quick. So I don't have any problem with the way that the Memphis Police Department handled this situation. What more do you want them to do?
Fair point. And what was the second thing we're going to bring up? I really don't have a counterpoint to that.
The second point is when you look at the situation, and again, I'm just reading reports because my mind cannot take more trauma again, more undue trauma against black people, unarmed black people. I just cannot take. So I can't watch the video, but I've read reports of what happened, right? What part of this is evil, and what part of this is due to the phenomena known as mob mentality? Do you think that all 5 of these officers would have been caught up in this behavior if there weren't 2 or more other officers on the scene already engaging in it?
That's a good point, actually. That's a very, very good point. Now, I will say this. I think they're weak of character. Regardless, weak of character. Because I'm not going to sit in there and be like, well, grab him, Bill. I'm going to start beating his ass with the 6th man in. Like, come on. It's ridiculous.
Didn't they start penalizing that in the NHL?
Yeah, you can't even have third man in.
Like 20 years ago, third man in? The third man in penalty?
Third man in, yeah. But, I mean, when it kind of comes down to it, do I think individually they would have gone off that, like, the rail if it was a one-on-one? I don't believe so, right? I'd maybe give it like a 85 to 90% chance it wouldn't happen if it was a one-on-one. What I do think happened is you had a guy, I don't know what the officer name is that started off getting violent, and then they're like, I don't know, just like you said, mob mentality, like, oh yeah, like let's fuck them up, and they lose their rationale, they lose their thought process. They're just like a bunch of fucking wild pack of dogs, to be very blunt, like just like like animals, just fucking boom, like attack. And I'm not, God, that's gonna sound awful, actually, Cliff.
No, but that's what the mob mentality does.
Yeah, it's just like a fucking.
That's
pack
exactly
of wolves.
what it is. I know that it sounds bad.
Yeah, like from a white guy
from an albino.
Yeah. Like, come on.
But what you described is exactly what it is, and I wonder. And then I know that people are going to probably criticize me when I say, hey, from this standpoint, I can have a little bit of sympathy for 1 or the 2 officers in there. And the reason why I say this is because as an empath, I put myself in the shoes of other people. And then I think to myself, if 2 officers are fucking this guy up, and then the other ones are a little bit hesitant to join in on the assault. Like I said, I didn't see the video on purpose, but I'm just saying. Imagine the last 2 guys in who their character would normally not allow them to act in this way. And they were in a position where they had to make the right decision or the wrong decision. And they opted for the wrong decision, and their lives are effectively over right now. Can you imagine being in that position where it's kind of like, you're on the basketball court, you're going for the steal, there's a 50-50 ball. Do you dive for that basketball, or do you let the ball go to the other team? Well, if I dive, I might get injured. If I don't dive for it, then I didn't play hard enough. And then you're kind of stuck on that line. Like, if I don't support my guys, are they ever going to trust me? If I'm being assaulted by a suspect, will these people come to my aid if I don't show solidarity? I don't know the questions that were going on in the minds of some of these guys, but I imagine that at least 2 of them are sitting in a jail cell right now, and they're replaying this in their mind and thinking, damn, man, If I had opted to do this and not that.
I mean, that's a fair point. Still doesn't justify it.
I'm not talking justification.
No, I know.
I'm talking about just kind of parsing through how mob mentality and you losing yourself in the herd can ruin your life.
I mean but I think it's a problem with most people. Most people aren't leaders; they're followers. Because there's been cases, I'm not saying like this per se, but there's been cases in my life when there's been altercations, and I'm the one like, hey, chill, like relax. It's fucking relax. It ain't worth this shit. Where that's what you have to do. That's staying within yourself. And these people were not able to stay within themselves. They just kind of, like a fucking dog chewing at a fucking bone or some shit, just had to go off. It was just, I don't know, just very, very saddening in a way. A life was lost due to 5 people being idiots and being disgusting human beings, personally. And I mean, you bring up a valid point though. It's like, those guys, probably some guys in there that are thinking like sitting there in prison or a jail cell, like, that was pretty fucking stupid, But I really don't have any sympathy for you, because if the people I want in those positions of power are people that are going to have the integrity to make the right decisions. And clearly, they did not have the integrity or the moral compass to be in that position. And then it goes into, like, what can you do to prevent this? Well, I hate to say it, you can't. You can't.
Yeah, I was about to go there, Cap. I was about to go there.
Because when it kind of comes down to it, what you truly find of a person and what they're made of is in times like this, in times of great difficulty. That's what you find out, like, the metal of what they are made of. And some people can't hack it. And some people think, oh yeah, I would never do that. But then they be the first person to, be a Judas, right? So it takes this type of situation to find out. Obviously, there's been certain officers with incidents that had a track record, and that's a whole different discussion.
Right.
But with this case, unless they had a background of assaulting or going over the top with detaining individuals, I mean, what can you do? You can't account for what the individual's going to do in times of that circumstance.
Right. Yeah. I have another controversial thought that I wasn't going to mention this, but, I when I was co-hosting another show, BPMH, we talked about how I believe it was a Buffalo, New York police officer who was railroaded by her department because she saw that another officer was using excessive force against a detained person. I think it was already handcuffed. And she stopped this guy from engaging in this. And because I have this memory of this, I asked myself this question. And again, this is going to be very controversial for some people. It's even controversial for myself, which is why I didn't want to bring this up. But as much as a lot of us guys are like, a lot of women don't belong in these dangerous situations. I cannot help but, and again, I have to be intellectually honest because I have this knowledge in my head of this actual incident that happened. And the one person to step in and break up what could have been another tragedy. It was a woman, a black woman, that stepped up and did the right thing. And then I got to ask myself, is that one of the biggest values that we can point to and say, women on the police force, not the worst idea? Now, not saying that women are incapable of doing fucked up shit, because we've seen that.
Yeah.
But I have this image in my mind of a black police officer who had a career and parts of her life destroyed because she actually physically stopped the assault that was happening on an unarmed detained citizen. And then I think, well, if that woman was there with these 5 officers. Could she have saved these 5 officers' lives, maybe their careers, by stepping in before things got out of hand and said, not tonight. That's not how we doing this. I just have this thought in my head, and it just keeps gnawing at me, and I can't let that shit go.
I think it's more of a character than gender, right? Because we've also seen female cops feeling like they had to prove themselves, so they'll just go right along the lines of violence. And I think this is where it kind of comes more down to the individual. Now, you know my thought about women on the beat. I think there should be with a male partner, and there should be, because just men are naturally stronger than women. You don't want to put them in a precarious situation.
Right.
But I mean, for that one instance you come to, I've seen many female officers literally stop a guy just reaching for his wallet and then murder him in cold blood, right? Because she thought she had a taser, and she shoots him with shoots him with a handgun.
About that. Yeah. So, she thought she had a taser, but she got her and the thing is, the taser is like 1/3 the weight of the handgun.
Like, don't get me started. And it's just like, I think it kind of comes down to the individual. And I just don't think those people were of strong enough character and will to be in that position. And unfortunately, a life was lost and things were changed. And the parents came out and said, we do like peaceful protests. We don't want no riots. We don't want nothing destroyed. And, when it kind of comes down to it, maybe not just as policing, but us as a human, us as human beings just need to really kind of take a step back and realize, like, those individuals that we are either, assisting or detaining, they have families and loved ones as well. And they want to get home to their family. Like, let's not forget about that. It's not just a power trip about you getting a certain quota for tickets there, Timothy. It's about, making sure you're doing your job and you're doing it properly and not abusing your power. I mean, it's crazy.
Right. So, yeah. I mean, but this is why I brought it up. Like, I have these thoughts in my head. And, of course, whenever there's a tragedy, people are searching for answers, and they're searching for ways to rationalize things that are totally irrational. There was nothing rational. There was nothing that substantiates this kind of behavior under any circumstance. I mean, I can't say under any circumstance, because I believe that, like, sometimes, like, when you see civilians who have, severely or mortally wounded a police officer, right? You expect that he's going to get the boots and the nightstick, and you expect bad things to happen to him in that situation. That's not professional, but you would understand from just, again, these are people that you go to work with every day, and then you see some fucking coward criminal put a bullet in them. I can see them being blinded by rage, but it's not the same thing as mob mentality, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, there might be one or two situations. Oh, you saw him, assaulting a child or something like that, and you lose yourself in that, and you have a rage reaction to that. I can see that, or harming a woman.
Yeah.
But this was nothing like that.
No,
whatsoever.
No, if you need 5 grown big ass men, because like if you look at the men in they're big dudes, like strong big dudes, and the guy they're detaining is nowhere near as big as them. And I'm not saying he's scrawny or whatever. I'm not insulting him. I'm just being realistic. Like the big cops, come on.
And from what we hear from the family, he was a very peaceful type of person.
Yeah, like come on, just absolutely ridiculous. And
yeah, I mean, I do want to add this one thing, because you just reminded me of something. And I really want to get your opinion on this. One of the things that really makes me emotional, that really makes me angry, is that the family of this young man, one of the first things that they did, they had to come out and try to decriminalize the unarmed man who was beaten to death. They had to come out and say, he likes sunsets and he created music and he never did anything to anybody. When what happened to him is not justifiable, even if he was the gangsterest thug that ever thugged. And I think that for a lot of Black people who have witnessed these heinous crimes on camera, and they still have people that are saying, you know what? We should not care that this life was senselessly taken, because look at this picture he took with toy guns when he was 14, or this guy was addicted to fentanyl because he had a back injury, like most of white America that was fed pills in the 2000s, and then they ended up hooked on shit. And it's like, we have to try to make it where we have to try to preface this by saying this guy was the most upstanding person, just to get people to care that we were murdered in cold blood in the street by people that are paid by our tax dollars to protect our lives, regardless of how you view us in society. That's frustrating.
So, and I don't disagree. This is where I'm going to go with this, and it might be a slight left field poll here, change up. This is what happens, because we talked about it before, about demonize the other side. You have so many police nut huggers, so many people thin blue line, and I know a lot of conservatives that will purely back the blue, regardless how much insurmountable evidence will come out that the cops fucked up. And it kind of comes into, well, if I'm wrong about this, I can't be wrong. I can't be wrong. I can't be wrong. And that's what this kind of comes into, is that people are always going to find a justification for their side. And I feel like those people that come out and say, "Oh, well, he was this, or he did this when he was 5 years old. He played with Mega Blocks and not Legos, so he's a murderous piece of shit." Like some wild, dumb shit, because they want to, stay. Like they don't want their worldview challenged. And that's why people were like, "Oh, well, I bet he was like, fucking whatever, like punching easy bake ovens or some shit. I don't know." And like they try to frame that person already in their mind. Oh, he must have been like a thug, a hood rat, like a gangbanger, and that they try to frame that so they can stay secure within their worldview, instead of just realizing, maybe the cops went a little bit over the top there. I mean, maybe the cops fucking overreached their power. Maybe the cop did an evil piece of shit deed. And, I mean, when it kind of comes down to it, I think that's mainly why you see people like, "Oh, well, I have to justify it," because on the internet's a fucking cesspool. Let's just call it. Social media is a cesspool. The worst of humanity comes out on social media, because there's a sense of you being anonymous behind a keyboard and people not knowing your face. Right? How many times have we seen trolls, right, insult people that we know behind the safety of a keyboard and not having their own picture up on Twitter or Facebook or whatever YouTube comment section, because they're losers and because they are afraid to get their worldview challenged. And that's where I think it comes from. And it's unfortunate, and it's not like, for example, like the George Floyd case. I'll bring it up because everyone knows about it.
Right, everybody knows the case. People were doing the George Floyd challenge. You remember that?
Yeah, I know. I mean, like when it kind of comes out, he was on drugs, he was on this. You can't tell me, right? Just criminal.
You can't tell me that people point at him being on drugs, that they haven't been on drugs earlier that day when they were typing that shit.
Well, and also like the criminal history I bring up, I don't give a fuck at that point. You have a knee on someone's neck, obviously causing distress. That's not how you detain anyone. Like anyone. Like maybe if you were like cattle that you were about to slaughter, but it's just people don't. They want to make justifications so they can like, "Oh yeah, well that was fine, that was justified. That made sense because he did X, Y, and Z." It's like, well, I don't give a fuck if he had sex with 20 prostitutes in Tampa Bay. If he's in Austin, Texas, not doing anything wrong, why are you like punching this motherfucker in the face while you detain him for no reason? But I mean, I know I'm a little rambly, but I think just absolutely kind of ridiculous the lengths people will go to just kind of keep their feeble minds okay, that like, "Oh, I'm on the right side."
Right.
It's weird.
Yeah,
very weird.
I have to agree with you on that, but it's another sad day in my neck of the woods. And again, I've gotten so much Why didn't you watch the video? Why didn't you do this? And it's just like, it's just trauma and then re-trauma. And for some people that are removed from this reality, it's like, well, I'm going to watch the video. I want to know what happened, because it's a little bit divorced from anything that feels close to you. And the more times this happens, the closer it feels, and the more pain that it causes when I see these things happening. And, I'll go a step further. I'm pretty sure that every single time something like this happens to a white person or a black person, because we've seen some police brutality, some high profile police brutality happen to white people in the last year and a half or so. I think again, a lot of police officers are wondering, why doesn't the public trust us? Why don't they like us? Why do we have to have this us versus them mentality? Well, this is Exhibit A, because we keep hearing about how there are all these good cops. And there's a lot of us that want to believe, or do believe on some level, that there are plenty of good officers out there. But when you don't hear officers speaking up and saying, this ain't it, then you start to seem like you're complicit in it with your silence. And the fact that these even if this wasn't a mob mentality thing, if it wasn't, you got 5 different human beings on the same force, on the same beat, on the same shift, that have this kind of disgusting vitriol running through their veins. It's not a bad apple.
Yeah.
Look at for those people that have watched the video, run what you saw through your mind. Is this a bad apple, or is this a bunch? You're going to have white people and black people and everybody in between looking at this and saying, this doesn't inspire a lot of confidence overall in American law enforcement techniques or American law enforcement personnel.
I'll just add something small real quick. For all those YouTubers that do police content and show cops icing bad guys, quote unquote, and showing body cam footage, not all of them, but some of them that stay away from cases like this, kind of shows the narrative they're trying to spin.
Can I give you a golf clap, Paul? Because one of the things that I noticed in this week when this stuff came out, I don't remember seeing a single thing come from Fox News.
No,
I could be wrong, but that shit's not coming up in my feed. Every other news source is coming up. I'm not seeing this from Fox News. And it's like, if you're supposed to be fair and balanced, I know they don't use that tagline anymore.
Nope.
But sometimes you have to step up and say, hey, guys, we need to take an exception here. Yes, we are pro-blue, thin blue line, all of that. However, we must cover this because this is in the national eye, and we have to condemn these actions. These motherfuckers won't say anything at all.
Well, and there's not, like, and I don't count the 5-10 minute report on it when it happened. None of these guys on these shows will have an actual conversation. And I mean, like I said, there's YouTube channels that are dedicated to showing police body cam footage that they will not touch certain cases if the cop was wrong, because they want to have that community that, oh yeah, it's justified. Oh, he pewed and shot. And I mean, I think the internet tough guy thinks it's extremely easy to take a life, to, like it's like a fun video game where someone gets ethered and it's like it's no big deal. It's just a criminal.
Call in the kill streak, you win the game.
At the end of the day, everyone is a human being, and when you have cases like this where the police did some heinous shit, I mean, you should report on it with the same amount of vigor as the ones where they're shooting the bad guy, quote unquote. Just my opinion.
Yeah, I definitely have to share that sentiment. In the comments section below, we want to hear what you guys have to say. This was a more longer form conversation. And I just think that it was necessary to put out a lot of these ideas, some of them controversial though they may be. We would really want you guys to interact with the thoughts and push back on some things that you think that I'm wrong about, because I know a bunch of y'all are going to think that I'm full of shit and I'm wrong. I want to know in the comments section why, and let's have an actual discussion. Perhaps we may open this up for a live format in the future. But we really want to know what you guys think about what you've read about this story. If you've seen the video, how the video affected you. Some of the ideas that we espoused on this podcast, please interact with the thoughts here. We try not to attack people. We try to attack ideologies. And if you think that we are wrong, we will proudly and in good faith interact with you and try to understand where you're coming from, because I could be completely, totally fucking wrong. I could. You know, and we Absolutely. And I recognize that possibility, strong possibility. You know,
I mean, listen, I'm never wrong though, so don't worry, I'm always right. But no, you know, like we want to have a dialogue, open conversation, and that's the great thing about this platform. We're just talking our shit. Want you to keep it. Don't attack the people, attack the ideas. That's all we ask.
And as always, you guys know that this is the home of the cold truth. And the hot takes. A lot of hot takes in this one. Please support the platform by liking the video. Please share it, because this discussion really does need to go wide. This is more than just police brutality. This is about our nation. This is about our collective consciousness as a country. And I think that we need to have more of a diverse approach to how we talk about these types of situations. I think that we might have a better chance of finding solutions, and if not, maybe try to find some peace wherever it can be found. So thank you very much for riding with us during this very sad conversation. We'll see you on the next one.